Today on Politics Unplugged, once again, political violence makes national headlines. We speak with a current congressional candidate and a survivor. Does President Trump's agenda threaten the environment? We hear from local experts about the impact of extreme weather on Arizona. Plus, MAGA world spars over another war in the Middle East. Our panel weighs in now on Politics Unplugged.
Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged. His career was shaped by political violence. Now he's running for Congress in southern Arizona. Daniel Hernandez joins us now to talk about this all-important issue. I want to thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, people who do know you probably remember you. You were, a staffer working for Gabby Giffords on that day that someone tried to assassinate her. So you've had a first-hand look at this. You've been a victim of this in many ways. Your thoughts about what we saw last weekend in Minnesota, where two people were killed, another two people were shot and injured. Two of them happened to be state lawmakers in Minnesota.
Thanks for having me on, Dennis. I think one of the very first things that I need to talk about is the fact that not only did this incident happen in Minnesota where two lawmakers were shot and one of whom was killed, 2 days before, on Thursday night, my home, which is also the home of my sister, State Representative Daniel Hernandez, was shot at. Political violence is something that I've been dealing with, unfortunately, for 14 years. The very first week after the shooting in Tucson, where Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot at, how did people respond? Threatening my life. So I've been dealing with political threats since I was 20 years old, even before I was in office. As a legislator, as a school board member, these have been consistent. I actually moved in with my sister Alma, who's a state representative, because of the number of death threats that she received after October 7th. So this is something that we've been dealing with for a long time. So when we woke up on Saturday, we had both overslept because 2 days before somebody had shot at our house. And we woke up to about 20 missed calls from my mom and my sister freaking out because they'd seen what had happened in Minnesota. So this is unfortunately a reality of not just my life and Alma's life, but so many other state level lawmakers who have no protection. I think that's the thing that people don't realize. You don't get Secret Service, you don't get security, you don't get round the clock protection. You just go out and do your job and try and help make sure that you're working on important bills.
And it's become part of campaigns. We've seen more and more candidates out there hiring security. Is this something that your campaign has thought about doing, has the money to do at this point, or needs to?
Do we have the money to do it? No, because when you are planning a campaign budget, you're worrying about mail pieces and TV ads. You're not worrying about hiring 24-hour around-the-clock security. We've had to take extra steps. We've changed where we're working out of. But this is not something that's normal, and I think that's something that we need to really talk about. This is not acceptable behavior. And what we're seeing is a ratcheting up of our politics. The temperature is getting really heated. You have dark money groups going into places all over, like even in my district, and spreading rumors and saying that I'm taking money under the table. You have Lucha going out there and saying that I'm taking money under the table and doing things that are illegal and going door to door. So that's ratcheting up an already tense environment where people are really upset.
Okay, and let's get back real quick. There was a staffer's car was shot outside your home in Tucson, your sister's home. That was a little over a week ago, or a week before the Minnesota thing happened. What have you learned from that since then? Has there anybody been arrested? Any more news on that front?
We haven't gotten any information or any updates other than it's currently under investigation. So we're working with the Tucson Police Department, but it happened right outside our dining room window where just seconds before my mom and 4 of my staff were. So it's something really scary that someone would shoot out the window of my staffer's car right underneath where my staff and my mom were. So I think for me, as a candidate, as an elected official, it's not just about me, it's about the people around me, because I don't want to be putting them in any additional danger.
Okay, so we don't know if it was intentional or just some random, but obviously given your history and out there, it gives everybody pause for sure. What I'm kind of interested in is maybe your opinion on why do you think this is ratcheting up? We've seen more and more of this, and it's not just Democrats being targeted, or it's both sides have been victimized by this. Steve Scalise in Congress, Donald Trump last year when he was running for office. We've seen this with Democrats now this year. What's behind all this? What is creating all of this?
I think what is creating this environment is a politics that's focused on destroying the other side and destroying people, as opposed to talking about policies and ideas. I have never campaigned negatively, even when I've been attacked mercilessly. I always talk about what people have done and what I'm going to do differently. Whether it was for the legislature, the school board, or running for Congress, I always talk about policies because I've seen political violence firsthand and I don't want to add to it. So, I think for me, what we have seen is this focus on attacking people and on destroying the other side. And I think that's a huge problem. And it turns people off, but it's been working. And because of the outside influence of dark money coming into races, we see this incentive for people to just go negative, 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 when what we really need to be talking about solutions for people. That's, you know, something that I've been dealing with for a long time, that we have these negative campaigns that happen all the time, and then people who are already primed to do something bad keep hearing, that person is horrible, they're awful, they're evil, when what we need to be talking about is policy and ideas.
And now let's shift a little bit over to your campaign. I mean, we were just talking about political violence and things like that. Is gun violence an issue in this Democratic primary that you're running in right now? And do you have a plan to deal with this?
Yeah. You know, gun violence, unfortunately, continues to be an important and hot topic, especially in light of what happened in Minnesota. So for me, I've been working on this for 14 years. I've actually had wins. When I was in the legislature, I was able to stop bad bills from getting signed into law. But even before I was there, I was the state director for Everytown. And the last good gun bill that passed in Arizona was one that I wrote in 2014 that Jan Brewer passed and signed into law. So the big things that I think need to get done are the things that I've been talking about for over a decade. Passing comprehensive background check, making sure that we pass red flag laws, but we need to stop having a nation of patchwork laws. We need to have one law that applies to everybody, because the laws in California and the laws in Arizona, Nevada, are completely different when it comes to things like background checks. And that's one of the problems, that people take advantage of this broken network of laws to be able to get access to guns that it's so easy right now.
And what is the overall law that you would be advocating for if you were able to go to Congress?
The biggest one right now, I think the easiest, and I say easy, which is not hard to understand, comprehensive background checks, so that every person, regardless of what state or territory they buy a firearm, has to go through the NICS criminal background check system. All
right, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Daniel Hernandez, thanks for stopping by here and talking about this. And still ahead, we just hit 117 degrees this week, a reminder that the brutal part of summer has arrived. We'll look at how the politics of climate change affects Arizona and where we're headed when Politics Unplugged continues. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. The Trump administration has been rolling back protections for the environment. So what does that mean going forward for the impact on climate change here in Arizona? Here to talk about that, Sandy Barr from the Sierra Club and Peter Juarez of Moms Clean Air Force. Thanks for being here both. And let's start with you, Peter. You guys have an event coming up here next week where you're going to be hearing personal stories about the personal impacts of climate change. What do you expect to hear, and why is this important?
Well, hopefully we're expecting about 100 people who are going to be sharing their stories, whether that's public health, people who are working outside, people who are experiencing extreme heat every single day. You know, we know that it's hot in Arizona every single year. But we're seeing it in drastic ways. We're seeing it also in our economy, where people are paying skyrocketed utility bills. We want to hear about people's stories and how they're being affected, and what these safeguards right now that we have implemented, what does that mean if these go away? And really opposing these cutbacks and saying, hey, here we are, and we want climate solutions, and we need them now.
Yeah, and a lot of focus here in Arizona, obviously, and particularly in the valley, is always focused on heat. What other stories are out there? Because, you know, Arizona is very diverse environment there. You know, what other stories are out there that maybe that's in northern Arizona that people aren't hearing every day, that where people are personally impacted by this?
Yeah, well, obviously Arizona's in the bullseye for climate change, and that is broadly acknowledged, except for maybe with the policymakers. But across the state, heat is an issue, even in places like Flagstaff. It's hotter here, but it is also hotter there as well. And you see impacts at places like Grand Canyon, where there are more heat deaths there related to people who, one, are not prepared, but two, you know, I think people underestimate the heat, and it has intensified. We're getting hotter. Arizona's the hottest, the state that's warming up the fastest in the country, and Phoenix and Tucson are in the top for hot cities as well. So yeah, throughout the state, we're seeing it, and it's people dying, it's people suffering heat illnesses, and it is.
And it's all kind of relative too. I mean, because just because Flagstaff is cooler, when it does get hotter there, you know, it impacts them as well. us living in the valley, we're kind of used to these triple-digit digits and 110-degree days. What kind of things have you been advocating for on the local level to deal with these types of impacts?
I mean, you know, Sandy was just talking about Flagstaff. We had a press conference there earlier this year about the wildfires that are happening there too, and thinking about all these people here in Phoenix, because it's so hot, that are now moving to places like that are a little bit cooler, like Flagstaff. But then what is happening in places like Flagstaff is that then the rent is really high. So we're seeing how climate change has an effect on so many different things, and the intersection of housing, the intersection of public health, the intersection of, you know, we're even talking to people who are pregnant, and what does that mean when they're pregnant in the heat? People are moving away from Arizona, and so our workforce, our economy, all of it takes, it all has an effect when we're talking about climate change and what that really covers.
Yeah, when you say wildfires, I start thinking about state government and things like that. What have you been seeing? You cover the legislature for years. You still may be the only environmental lobbyist down at the state legislature. You know, what have you been seeing out of this governor, out of this legislature when it comes to dealing with these impacts?
Well, first of all, the legislature has done nothing relative to climate. They've attempted to go backwards. They've undermined or tried to undermine clean energy programs, a tax on solar, wind, other types of clean energy. The governor's office set up the Office of Resiliency. They have a program that is funded by federal dollars, primarily the Efficiency Arizona office, where people can access information about home energy rebates. That's really important program for people, especially with low incomes, but it's available to others as well. They've been very invested in the Solar for All program. And the governor's office is very much aware of how much Arizona has to lose if the rollbacks happen in the reconciliation bill in Congress. There are more than 130 projects in Arizona at risk. And interestingly enough, those projects are primarily in Republican congressional districts. So we'll see how they come down on that. And then, of course, our public lands. In Arizona, we love our public lands. The Senate is now proposing to sell off 14 million acres of national forests and Bureau of Land Management.
A lot of that
lands.
here in Arizona.
That 14 million is here in Arizona.
Yeah, okay.
It's like 250 million total. It's a huge amount, and it's one thing that there is a lot of bipartisan support for, and that is public land. So the Congress, I think, needs to get in touch with the people of Arizona.
And I want to get back with you on that in just a second, but I did want to ask Peta about the governor's heat plan she rolled out a couple of years ago. Do you think that's been an effective way to deal with this? What have you been hearing from people, on the streets that have taken advantage of this, or do you think more should be done?
I mean, always more should be done, but yes, I think that those have been great benefits of things that we didn't have before because of the Office of Resilience that the administration created. There has been more infrastructure to create the accessibility for people to know more about these programs, and a lot of the people who are taking advantage of these programs are going to be your low-income families who really need these types of incentives. When we're talking about transitioning your, to a heat pump, or these tax credits that are really helping out Arizona families, and especially in extreme heat as we're getting hotter.
All right, let's finish out. Again, you were talking about the state lands, and I think a lot of people, they don't understand. Obviously, 38%, almost 40% of the land in Arizona is federal land. When you start talking about putting up 14 million acres in Arizona up for sale, how does that tie into climate change?
Well, our national forests and the Bureau of Land Management lands, they retain carbon, and carbon is a huge part of climate change, so that's important. They help provide clean air and water, and for our state as well, they're important from a recreational and tourism perspective. So the other thing is, I'm not sure if those lands were developed, which a lot of them have zero infrastructure, and so it's there's huge question about it. But how would it be served? Where would the water come from, for example? And what would it do to our state trust lands? Would it cause the value of the trust lands to go down because you would now have these lands competing with state trust lands? It's something that I don't think the Congress has even considered. But yeah, they're very important from a climate perspective. I will add too, one of the bad things that the legislature did this session relative to climate is they passed a bill, and unfortunately the governor signed it, that will allow at least one coal plant to continue operating, and that is going the wrong way when it comes to climate change.
All right, we'll have to end it right there. Thank you both for joining us here today. And up next, I'm bringing in our panel to talk about all of this week's major headlines, including the high-profile MAGA infighting over the situation in Iran. That's next on Politics Unplugged. To get more in-depth on the issues, check out the Politics Unplugged podcast this week. We go over this week's headlines with Barrett Marson and Yolanda Bejarano. The Politics Unplugged podcast drops every Sunday wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. The situation in Iran is creating some high-profile disagreements on the right, including a testy interview between Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz, where Carlson mocked Cruz's ignorance about the country. So is there a divide on this issue? Here to talk about that and the rest of this week's headlines, Democratic consultant Stacey Pearson and Republican consultant Chip Scutari. Thank you both for being here. Chip, you're the resident Republican at the table. This creating a divide, divide over the war in Iran, because a lot of people point out that Donald Trump ran as kind of a peacemaker. Kind of the peacenik of the whole of everything, but here he is in a situation where you see tensions escalating on the verge of yet another war in the Middle East.
Dennis, while the Tucker Carlson, Senator Cruz spat was entertaining, it's good for clickbait. I really think this MAGA civil war is much ado about nothing, and the reason I say that is because Donald Trump, like him or loathe him, has such a vice grip on his party like I've never seen before in my lifetime. Not Obama, not Reagan. He could do whatever he wants. Even Steve Bannon was on his podcast today, said, we'll disagree with him up to a point, but he has more intelligence than we do, so we'll back off. So I think unless there's a quagmire and President Trump, which I don't think he'll do, wants to go into nation building, which he's railed against for decades. I think the MAGA base will stay in play. I think there's other issues that could crack that electorate, maybe Medicaid cuts or something that'll hurt rural voters. I don't think this is it.
All right, and we'll get back to some of those other issues, because I think the big beautiful bill could be one of those issues that could splinter off the MAGA coalition. But again, we've heard Donald Trump say that MAGA is what America First is, whatever he says it is. You agree with Chip here that this fight here, this split, is much ado about nothing?
It certainly is not much to do about nothing. We're looking at a shrinking MAGA population and a growing unhappy Republican electorate. MAGA is just one faction of that group. And so I think we're going to see more Republicans who are increasingly frustrated with tax breaks going to the wealthy and cuts at their local communities and highways that aren't being built and all of these other things that are going to happen. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that big bill, the big bill that Donald Trump calls his big beautiful bill, their proposed Medicaid cuts. And this is a real issue that could have real world impacts with his base, correct?
Exactly. Arizona, like most states, we have a severe shortage of doctors and nurses. That's exacerbated in the rural areas. If Medicaid is cut, if this provider tax is gone, it could shut down rural hospitals, not just here, but all across the country. And so those rural voters who are MAGA Trump voters, when it hits them and they can't get the health care they need, I think that could be the split more so than the Iran war. To me personally, I think it'll hurt their pocketbook, it'll hurt their health care, it'll limit their health care options, and that's something that hits home and it will affect people, right in their face.
And I know you take a look at a lot of polls, you take the temperature of the public opinion a lot. I mean, what does the public think about what's in this bill from what they know about it?
So everyone's worried about their own personal economy, and this bill does very little for average Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, I'd argue it does nothing. I mean, costs are going to increase. To Chip's point, their access to health care. We're talking about people who are going to die because there's not a cardiologist in Flagstaff anymore, or in Snowflake, or whatever these communities are. We're talking about lives literally being on the line. So the big beautiful bill doesn't do squat for the majority of average Americans.
Well, an interesting thing, you guys are both in messaging, you're in consulting and PR. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's much of a message behind this bill, or if there is, it's probably negative, right?
Yeah, well, somewhat. I mean, it depends. Like, most of the work here in D.C. is just wrangling votes. You know, it's not about, it sounds weird to say, but we're in this business. The policy is one thing, and it's important to people's lives, but most of it is the lobbying and getting this big, beautiful bill, as Donald Trump calls it, over the finish line. But I think there's an opportunity for the Democrats that they don't have a unified voice. They're kind of all over the place on this bill. There's an opportunity to shape this bill in a way that they want and get certain centrist Republicans over to their side. But I don't see a solidified voice from the other side railing against this bill.
All right, let's shift focus now. Let's look at the state level here, and let's talk about they're trying to pass a budget this past week. The June 30th deadline is rapidly approaching. For those who don't know, the state doesn't pass a budget, a spending plan by the end of the month, parts of the state government could be shutting down, which would be very inconvenient for a lot of folks, I would think. But one of the big issues, it's not in the budget, but it's adjacent, was a bill that would ostensibly keep the Diamondbacks playing at Chase Field downtown. Now, that did pass the Senate. It's going over to the House. Why has this taken so long? Because it's been stalled over in the legislature and the Senate for such a long time. What's been the holdup here?
Well, and in full disclosure, my office, my business partner worked on that and is working on that. So
you know all the details,
I know a
good
lot.
And bad.
Well, and
give us the bad.
I've been involved in these sports stadiums for longer than I care to admit. But the question is, how do we take care of a publicly owned building? We're not building a new building. 30 years ago, the decision was made for the public to pay for Chase Field. Yeah. And now that air conditioner is older than anyone on our homes. And so how do we address that? How do we fix it? How do we bring it back up to standard? So it's been convincing folks that this is not lining anybody's pocket. This is taking care of a facility that the public already owns.
I think the big issue, though, is that it reverts taxes back to the D-backs, and I think the public appetite for subsidizing sports stadiums for billionaires is the way they see that, and there's not much of an appetite for that, correct?
Yeah, and I think from where this bill started, and Stacey knows better than anybody, to where it is now, it's come a long way in a positive direction. And I think, Mayor Phoenix Kate Gallego deserves a ton of credit for being pretty much a taxpayer watchdog and fighting for her city. You know, they limited the exposure to, I think, $3.5 million annually. The city of Phoenix will own this property at the end of the 30 years. So it's got a lot of positives. It was bipartisan support. I think she deserves a lot of credit for standing up for her city and getting a good deal.
Well, we'll end on this. I mean, I think one thing that some people will have some concern about is, once again, the Diamondbacks say they're going to pay about $250 million to throw into this deal, but they're not obligated to legally under this legislation.
Well, that doesn't mean they won't be obligated under a lease or under some other agreement with the government entity that owns this building where the air conditioning doesn't work.
Okay, so we'll have to end it right there. That's all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.